Hello again. Welcome back to Print Island. My name is Richard Askam, and by now you should know that I am the Lighthouse keeper here on Print Island, and I'm always joined by some fascinating and interesting guests here on the Lighthouse, and today is no exception. And can I welcome, and I can't remember which time zone they're in, so I'm not going to say good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, because I just can't remember. Jermaine and Abisha from Printing South Africa. Gentlemen, welcome to the Lighthouse.
Yeah, thanks, Richard.
Thank you.
Great to be
Thank you
here.
so much.
Look forward to it.
Yeah, well, it's lovely to have you on, and I know where you are on your side of of Print Island. It's the weather is considerably better than it is where I am on my side of Print Island, but we're slowly catching up with you. I think maybe one of these days I'm going to take this sweater off.
Hopefully
Yeah.
sooner rather than later, eh?
Yeah, exactly. So listen, let's jump straight into this really, because one of the things that fascinates me about Printing South Africa, and I think it's a little known fact really around the world of print, is just how long you guys, not you guys personally, but you as an organization, have been going. 115 years, is that right, Jermaine?
Yeah, Abisha's been there from the start, so I'm going to ask him to go.
Yeah,
You're looking well on it, Abisha.
it's good, so they say, because apparently black don't crack. So yeah, I think 115 years certainly we've been servicing the printing, packaging, signage, and visual communications industry. So it's quite a proud moment for us. As a matter of fact, on Friday we celebrate the milestone nationally in all of our branches. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, it's always a little bit lost on people, isn't it? How long organisations have been around, because you only see today, and most people maybe go back as far as yesterday. But 115 years, that's something to be celebrated, Jermaine.
Absolutely. I think, 115 years is no small feat. I mean, any organization that celebrates 115 years is worthy of celebration in all aspects of what you can think about. And I know whilst, Printing SA has this prestigious positioning in South Africa, just by looking at its name, it goes back so far into our roots. When we look into it, we look at, just the other day we were chatting and we were thinking about what it would look like 115 years ago with people sitting around a table having a discussion. And our imagination sort of was reeling back, and we would think like 115 years from now, what would people say about us who are sitting around the table 115 years before? So it's just such a nostalgic feeling, and that this organization has stood the test of time, has been through all of the various shenanigans of politicians and geopolitical wars and impacts locally and globally, and it's still immersing itself. It's such a creative and exciting space to be in, because where we are at the moment is reigniting who we are as an industry association to be a 21st century authentic and relevant entity. And that's such an amazing feeling, that we don't have to be 115 years old and feel like that. We are transitioning and traversing and going through all of these ebbs and flows, but the future is certainly looking bright.
Yeah, no, I love that, and I love the word shenanigans as well. So you're straight through to the next round on word bingo as far as that one's concerned. It's interesting you say that, and Abisha, I think it's when people are always interested to know that an organisation is long-standing and it has history and what have you. But the relevance is what's next, isn't it? Really, because I had a conversation a couple of weeks ago with somebody in the Lighthouse about the technology might have changed, but the behaviour has to change with it. So I think the challenge for Printing SA and around the world is to get the industry, the players in the industry, your members, the PSPs around the world, to have that behavioural shift, and let the technology, let today's version of Printing SA become tomorrow's as well. That's the challenge, isn't it?
No, absolutely. You're spot on there, Rich. And I think for us, we look at our team, and obviously, we speak from a different point of view, being an industry association as opposed to, the actual printers. So we get to experience kind of a very different dynamic, where we look at our team, which now average age, went down, I think in the last 3 years or so, from about, 49 to about 32. So it just shows you that as much legacy exists, we've got a very young sort of demographic within our team that brings a youthful exuberance to the platform, ensuring that we stay relevant because I suppose the way that we relate to the ever changing dynamics locally as well as globally, we're able to pivot a lot quicker as opposed to many years ago when people weren't as inclined to embrace change as we are now. So I think technology obviously has done that for us to a great extent, and we continue to embrace it because the more and more we see AI evolving, you just start to realize that, guys, we we either get on this bus or we get left behind. So it's been quite interesting, and I hope that the new narrative that we bring as a younger team is starting to show that we are keeping abreast with what's happening, and we are trying to bring a lot of innovations, a lot of ideas to change the game, so to speak, and make us more relevant. As a matter of fact, I think my parting shot to that would be, the other day we unpack research on salaries and skills benchmarking for our sector. Never been done before for our sector in South Africa, so to speak. But one thing that came to my mind was, what the terminology we use to describe occupations. In 2026, we're still calling people machine minders or machine operators. And then we wonder why the youth is not so engaged to enter our sector. It's just, it sounds so blue collar to the point where it's not appealing at all. So I think my next move to world domination is to take all occupations in the industry and give them a bit of an edge and rename them to something a little bit more relevant and with the times.
Yeah, you're singing my song in there, Abisha, as well. I've been saying this for a while, that actually the industry and the language that the industry uses needs a rebrand, because you can still do the same jobs, but just change the way that they're described, and people will see them differently. I've said for a few years now, and I've stood on stages at print shows and said this, that the print industry is actually the tech industry. It just doesn't know it. And so, when you're trying to engage the next generation, and my 18-year-old daughter, for example, if I still started to talk about some of the language and the phrases and the buzzwords and the acronyms and what have you, that I know it's a language and I know it's been around for a long time. But this is my point about behavior. And if you match behavior to language, Jermaine, we have to be able to talk to the industry today, but the industry tomorrow, almost at the same time. And that really is quite tricky, but it's not impossible. If you look at the development of technology and the way that we are all adapting to it, I mean, let's be honest, that's less than 20 years old. And yet it's changed our world entirely, in less than a generation. So what's it going to look like in 20 years? I don't know. But the only way we're going to get there is if, with our sanity intact, is if we take the next generation with us. What's your thoughts on this? How do we rebrand the print industry?
Yeah, I think that's an absolutely critical point that we need to talk about. When I took over the helm of Printing SA, and then when we started rallying the groups of the team together in Printing SA, it was at a time where Printing SA was positioned as an industry association, but so rooted in legacy that it was not forward-facing. And because it wasn't forward-facing, we weren't addressing some of the burgeoning issues that are presenting itself to us. Youth development, attracting youth to the printing industry is not a South African problem. It's a global problem. And I sit in FESPA meetings. I sit, with the World Print Communication Forum. We converse across the world. Research even points in that direction. And so, what we're doing in that regard is that we're getting into engagements where we start creating career awareness with our youth, but we also are integrating and packaging this industry very differently in the minds of young people that are coming in. And going back to my initial point, going from this legacy organization that looked at things very differently and very narrowed, with a very narrowed perspective, we've now come in with very fresh perspectives, fresh ideas, starting to understand what is happening in the social media space. How is artificial intelligence and how is technology reshaping our industry to go from a pure print industry into a highly integrated industry, absorbing a lot of these technologies and all of that. So I think the future of print can go two ways. And that's why I admire the work that Print Island is doing. I think Print Island, with its core message of saying, we're going to take the world of print outside of this island once we've rallied the troops together on this island to have a singular voice, is quite critical. Because unless we find creative ways to attract young people and take this messaging in a way that is creative and succinct and appealing outside of the island, we're going to have a group of people that is entering the market that are going to choose other career pathways because of their limited ideologies and perception of the print industry. So I think, media is going to play an important part in it. How we shape the narrative of what people think of print and packaging as. And I think we're going to have to find, like Abisha was saying, we're going to have to find some appealing and creative ways for it, or in naming conventions for certain things that we do. Start to call a printing machine operator some glorified technician. Some name that resonates very strongly with a youthful appeal. And I think that plays a critical part. I mean, if you just look at social media, and if you look at the average time a person spends on a particular post, I mean, just the other day we were talking about somebody spending at least 3 to 4 seconds only before they skip to the next post. And I mean, everybody, whether you're a youth or whether you are somebody higher up in the age bracket, to put it politely, everybody's spending time on social media. Everybody's digitally inclined. And if we can start influencing that space in a creative way, I think we would start chipping away very quickly at the captured mindsets of people who have a very traditional view of print and packaging.
Yeah, no, I agree, and Abisha, I think there's another step in there as well, which is critical, which is let's continue on this conversation about the young people, and I'd be interested to hear your view from a South African perspective as well. But I don't think they see print. I think it's just part of the fabric of their life, and they don't see it as print. And we were talking the other day that we're exposed to print from such an early age. The first thing we see is a book that our mum or dad reads to us, or just the world of print is part of our landscape, and therefore we don't see it. So I wonder whether there's a conversation that needs to happen here. And again, I'd be interested in your viewpoint on this. If we can get our young people to see print as a brilliant communication tool, which it is, they just don't know that it is, then maybe that will spur the interest into, I wonder how it's made, and we bring them into the industry from a consumer perspective rather than from a manufacturing perspective. Yeah. What's your thoughts on that, Abisha?
Look, I couldn't agree with you more. One of the big things that we do at Printing SA is we do career days where we actually take schools to our member companies, and we talk to them about career pathing in our sector. And we explore various occupations within the sector, so not only from the technical aspect, but, to more of your generic sort of roles, like your business administration roles, your sales, your marketing, your graphic design, your finance. All of those professions or occupations are relevant in our industry, but people often stumble across them as a by type of thing, as opposed to like actively looking for opportunities, within our space. So what we've absolutely tried to do, because, like Jermaine said, we sit internationally on various forums that youth engagement is a big problem. And I think it's the way that we've positioned the industry. Growing up, going back to my school days, when we went to career days or, were invited to exhibitions, the sector was never profiled. So, we knew about bankers, we knew about lawyers, we knew about doctors, we knew about all of the mainstream types of occupations, but our sector was never profiled. So it kind of came from somewhere, nobody knew where. and now, we sit in such a unique position where I always say to the kids, did you actually notice from the moment you woke up this morning that you interacted with our sector? From the duvet cover to the toothpaste tube to the Kellogg's box, to literally every single thing you've done since your eyes opened, was a reflection of us as a visual communications industry. So profiling is one thing that I think the industry needs to do a lot better. Um, I think what we often meet as an association is when we start to talk advertising and marketing and profiling, we actually put ourselves in a bit of a tricky position because the powers that be tend to see that as being more of a cost center as opposed to a driver of potential. And once we get to that point where we appreciate that campaigning for the industry and making sure that the non-industry participants are aware of what we do, then we're going to create more demand, more interest, and more participation from various other sectors, and more especially from the youth.
Yeah, and it would be an interesting experiment, Jermaine, because my daughter is an iPhone child, if you like. She's grown up in a digital world. The only time she notices the tech is when it stops working. It's become so intrinsic to her life that if the Wi-Fi goes down or there's a power cut or whatever, that's the only time that she realizes how entrenched she is with the use of technology. So for print, which as I said before, people aren't seeing because it's so entrenched in their mind. There has to be a way that we get them to see it. The only experiment that I can think of, similar to turning off the power for Wi-Fi, is to put everything in a supermarket without any print on it, and see if. Okay, well, I was going to say, see if people notice. What happened? Tell me about it.
Yeah, so we actually did a promotional video a few years ago to augment the power of print and how print is relevant in our daily lives. And what we did was, through a series of print videos, we removed all of the printed matter from every single item on their retail shop floor and shelf. And people walked in and they picked up a box of cereal and trying to figure out, is this a Cocoa Pops, or is this a cornflakes, or is this some other brand? And the only way to find out is going to open the box. But then if you open the box, you got to pay. Is this a can of baked beans? Is this a can of lentil soup? Or is this, what is it? And that's the type of awareness we try to bring across. And I think it's maybe time is for resurgence of that video, to take it and just flash it again for people to be reminded how integrated and impactful print is to our everyday life.
Absolutely, and again, this sort of long-running, ridiculous argument and debate that seems to happen every year about is print dead, is just such a ridiculous statement to make when you consider what you've just said about everyday stuff. But never mind the sort of whiz-bang stuff that print can do. And before we even get anywhere near AI and personalization and all of the things that it enables, it starts with the basics. You're sitting there in a hat today, Abisha, that somebody's printing essay on. That kind of thing. Your sneakers, all of the things that we are everyday lives is print. So instead of print is dead, it should be print is different. And if people, we're quite curious creatures, I think, as human beings. If we're led with some degree of curiosity towards the education, then that would make a big difference, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think getting to that point where we're finding the sweet spot is quite key. And like I said earlier, this is a global problem. It's not just isolated to us in South Africa. Our colleagues all over the world are complaining that the industry is suffering from this sort of brain drain, so to speak, or a lack of new entrants because the profession is not profiled to meet the current sort of expectation and demand from the youth. And we really need to arrest this situation as a global community. And I think that's why Print Island is so important, because people that are within our ecosystem will see and hear this conversation, and perhaps maybe they'll reach out and give us some pointers as to how they're doing it better than possibly we are. And then there's a snowball effect that will take shape, and eventually as an industry, we unite at some point of convergence, and we start to preach a message that is, that resonates across, all barriers and boundaries.
Yeah, well, I hope so, and that's certainly our intention with Print Island, and as you know, it was created really because of the fact that the print industry is very good at talking to itself, but not necessarily to the outside world. So we want to aggregate all of that talking in various strands and various formats. Spotify for print is what we're trying to be, so you can come and listen to whatever music you want to, but it's all good, whichever one that you listen to, and then broadcast that to the world. And I think, Jermaine, one of our hopes really for the industry is that curiosity that human beings have naturally, that when they hear something interesting, they'll latch onto it. And, you know, we're all consumers as well as print professionals. So hopefully there is a gap, but it shouldn't take too long to bridge that gap, I hope.
Yeah, I think, you know, if you look at research and if you look at what is happening globally from a trend perspective, we have a lot more people that are curious about a lot of what is happening around them. Now, if I take a statistic like what are young people or the youth that are coming through now, uh, what is their dispensation or propensity to want to understand sustainable practices of a brand, to understand what a brand is doing or what type of brand they're buying and where was the sourced and all of those type of blockchain technologies and understanding that type of narrative. It gives you an inkling to understand that these youth coming through the system are a lot more aware of what they're interacting with daily. They might be oblivious to a few things because they're tech nomads and all of these type of things. But if we take some nuggets out of what they're actually doing in other contexts, it helps us to understand that these young people and youth that are coming through the system now are a lot more aware of their ecosystem. And if we can tap into that curiosity and throw at them some things that are, you know, quite appealing from a print perspective that allows them to think, I think then we would be latching onto something that is ripe for the taking. And I think the opportunities do exist. It's just about being a lot more scientific about it, tugging and sort of jagging that emotional connection that they have with what they interact with every day. And I think we can get across quite a strong message about print and packaging in a different context.
I agree entirely, and I think Abisha, I've had this plan in my mind for some time now, and I'm going to run it past you, see what you think. You can either laugh or cry, I don't mind. But I think there's a space, a gap for a consumer print show, because I think the difficulty that we have is that we spend a lot of time talking to each other, and trade shows by their very nature are for the trade. When you look at the world of electronics, as an example, there is a huge trade show, or a huge show that happens every year, the Consumer Electronics Show, where the manufacturers of clever stuff invite the people that are likely to buy it, as in the consumers, to come and have a look. It's one big show and tell. I think there's a gap here, and it would be interesting to trial it with you guys in South Africa at some point, to actually have those brilliant print manufacturers show their wares directly to the consumers, and at the very least let them get excited about it. Because as I said before, once you sparked that curiosity, it will be amazing how quickly the industry could develop if only they brought the end user into the conversation. What do you think?
Look, I think you've nailed it. We've actually seen over the past couple of years that there's been somewhat of a stagnancy in the marketplace when it comes to the trade exhibitions. They're not growing exponentially. They're not declining exponentially. It's just sort of flat. And
Hmm.
that's because, you know, the narrative needs to change. There needs to be a new way to deliver on the entire ecosystem without it being so sort of like done. And at the moment, I feel like it's done. And when we
Hmm.
get to that point where we start to appreciate that the ecosystem is a lot bigger than just the OEM, there's a lot more players involved. There's brand owners involved. They like, you know, Jermaine is big on brand owners. There's the converter, like you said, who's involved. There's the OE. So all of these people need to converge it at a point where you know, the show is about solutions holistically as opposed to just for a segment of people that are part of that ecosystem. There used to be conversations around, you know, skills development at these expos, which is a role that we play by and large as an industry association. But you know, now we need to amplify that. We need to start being a lot more intentional about bringing that level of knowledge to the marketplace. and getting people to have those experiential moments with what we offer as an association, as well as, so does everybody else who's coming together. So yeah, you're right. It's time that we do consider the format, and hopefully we can get it right this year. We've still got about 2 shows to go for the year, so yeah, let's keep chatting and see what we can do.
Maybe it's time for Print Island Live.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. My point. I spoke to Gene and Phil about this, and I was like, well, we're coming up to September, the big show, so like, why don't we do something that is that a little bit disruptive that we've never done before? So yeah, that's a conversation we need to continue having.
Well, if you look back over these glorious 115 years that you've been alive, Abisha, of printing South Africa, each and of course we only see the points of disruption when we tend to look back. History is very good to allow us to study the pivots and the wiggles that have been made along the way by all industries, not limited to print, by the way. But when you look back at that 115 years and consider some of the major changes that have happened during that time, that at the time probably felt quite critical, but also quite small in the scheme of things. What I'm talking about here is a tiny change, because everything already exists. Nothing has to be changed. Nothing has to be designed. Nothing has to be created. We just have to speak to a different audience. And if we can do that, and we're natural communicators anyway, the industry, I think, is brilliant the way it communicates internally. If you could just turn that externally, then I think the game could be won quite quickly. And in 115 years' time, when you're still here, Abisha, but Jermaine and I are not, they'll look back on 2026 as a major turning point for the print industry. Yeah. Possible? What do you think? No, Jermaine, you go.
Yeah, well, Jermaine,
sorry.
No, absolutely. I'm quite strong in closing the loop. How do we link that missing component in the ecosystem at the moment? I think we've spent enough time talking to brand owners, talking to OEMs, and bringing converters together, because we've explored that model. And it works. I mean, we're not saying it doesn't work, but how do we find that golden thread that flows through the consumer as well? And unless we do that, and it comes back to a discussion that I think we were having yesterday, and that discussion was around how do we take the consumer and influence them from our perspective, and if we can take them and throw them into the ecosystem, that is then definitely going to change the narrative of print, because now your scalability with consumers is going to be a lot stronger from that perspective. And if we look into the future, I think it's the old adage: you can't do the same thing and expect different results. Yeah. You got to do something different, and I think that's what we're talking about at the moment. And if the consumer has been completely underrated in our regards before, we've got to review that and see how we can rate them a lot higher and include them into our ecosystem to grow it and do something different to the future.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. Abisha, sorry, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I was just thinking out loud now where, if you look at the hobby market, the guys here that do Hobby X, which is a massive expo just for hobbyists, people that do arts and crafts, at home, they bring everything to one central location, and it's bigger than what we do in a sector that is probably worth 3 times that. So you've got to think to yourself, like, what is the philosophy behind something like that, which gets so much interaction, versus something like ours, which is a multi-billion-dollar industry, but is losing traction instead of gaining it. There's something we're missing here. The golden thread analogy that Jermaine used is quite profound in this instance. Is we need to think about how do we start marrying all of it and bringing it together, instead of like currently where it's a little bit fragmented and certain things are happening in isolation.
Yeah, no, I agree. And watch this space. I think, ladies and gentlemen, if you're watching this today, I think there's a plan forming here before our very eyes. So, gentlemen, we're coming up to the end of our time today in the Lighthouse on Print Island. And of course, we have this wonderful view from the top of the Lighthouse out over the industry. You're 115 years in to Printing SA. What's your view? What does your view look like from here for the next 115 years? What would you like to see happen?
Geez, it's going to look nothing like it's looking now. Hey, um, it's like I said in my initial statement, it's an amazing journey. I mean, we appreciate what we've done in 115 years, but the next 115 years looks like an absolute hummer. Eh? There's so much of changes. There's so much of movements. There's so much of exciting things that we are going to have to align ourselves to drive this industry forward. And I think that's a critical point for us. We see ourselves now as this industry association that has a pivotal part to play in driving the industry forward. And I used this analogy with somebody that I was having a chat to the a few days ago, and we were chatting about how we see ourselves into the future. It's like this tugboat that is sort of leading everyone in this association to a point of safety, getting to a point where you can reload, get back out there into the ocean and do whatever you need to do. Because ultimately, our industry is converting. They are doing the real mechanics of what needs to be done to bridge the gap between the consumer and the brand owner. But we, this industry association, that's bringing them into harbor, making sure that they're well prepared, well stocked, restocked, and send them back out again, whether that's training and development, whether that's through consulting when there's a bit of a hiccup. But there's all of these exciting ideas. And I mean, we're moving into I don't know whether to call it a 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, even 115.0, but that's where we're moving into. We're kicking into new gear. We've got some fresh ideas as to how we can change the narrative of thinking around. Bisha was talking about marketing and communication. How do we reinvent ourselves and create a space so that we can start attracting younger people? How do we start developing new trades and occupations that's aligned to the technological advancements that's happening and occurring in the printing industry? I mean, I'll give you an example. We traditionally never focus on signage. I mean, we included signage and visual comms under our strapline, but they were sort of the abandoned children in our camp. And what we're doing now is we're getting so entrenched into it that this industry or this segment is going to be so well fed that they're going to just sort of spread the news, and we're going to start harvesting a lot more of the signage segment into us. So the 115 years that we've been through was great, but the next 115 years is going to be an absolute hummer, like I said. I'm so excited about it. I'm sure that the team, when I rally the troops together and start calibrating their minds as to what we're setting ourselves up for, and I mean even the emergence of Print Island with your role to play in it, it comes back to what you were saying before. We've been through so many evolutions, and at the time we can become nervous about it. But there's also so much of opportunities that present itself, and Print Islands is sort of tacked onto that. I mean, with the evolution of artificial intelligence, you would see that people became nervous, and people still express it that we're concerned about artificial intelligence. But every new piece of technology sort of prefaced a new opportunity for businesses, and that's what we're wanting to do. We're wanting to say, well, there's a challenge, but that's great. How do we now tack onto that challenge and say, take this person who did a traditional job and push them and springboard them into the next? So I think you can sort of assess the exuberance that's coming out of me, but there's a great level of excitement in our camp as to what we can do, how we can stay relevant, and how we can keep this industry at the cutting edge of technology and development and moving brand owners and consumers in a different direction.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. And the exuberance, I think, is just a great advert for the opportunities that exist going forward. So thank you for that. And Abisha, I guess, as human beings, we're naturally always a little bit wary of change, aren't we? We don't like to move. We don't like to move as quick as the world would have us move. But I think in this case, and for the next 115 years, we're going to kind of have to get used to that speed, aren't we?
No, absolutely. And I think, like just to, if you were to look at how this industry looked globally pre-COVID, and where we're at now, it's sort of moved at like lightning speed in 5 years. And you wonder like, gosh, what, did there have to be like this, tectonic shift for people to realize that, what, innovation is something that should be part of your DNA and not something that comes around because of the advent of a crisis. So, we've seen that digital will absolutely dominate. We know that for a fact. It's not going to replace everything, but it will certainly play a big role. I'm also looking at things like hyper personalization, where customers are going to start demanding more customized printed experiences. So, like, pretty much like what you did with Share a Coke is going to become the norm. Like, people are just going to want things that are just so unique, and they can identify with on a personal note than ever before. We know that packaging is the biggest growth area. It has been for the last 5 years. It will continue to be, because I think that doesn't, it's not mutually exclusive when we start talking digitization, because things become a lot more accessible. Your sustainability for us, we've seen in Africa, it's not really that high on the agenda, because there's not that much of a push from brand owners, but I think that will definitely become a non-negotiable as time goes. And research tells us that, as a matter of fact. So in case the people are going to watch this and think I'm talking crazy, we've got the document to back it up. I think the automation of the workflows is another big one, where we're starting to see our print businesses looking more like tech-enabled production facilities, as opposed to just organizations that have got printing presses. So that's where we were talking before about, like, what do we call these new occupations or the current ones? They need to move with that narrative of being tech-enabled, of being, in touch with the times. I see an industry consolidating even more. I think those that are going to fail to keep to pace with, the adaptability of all of the changes we're seeing, especially from a technological point of view, will struggle, and the larger players will absorb them at some point. The skills base is definitely going to shift. That we know. We do studies all the time trying to ascertain whether or not our current course material is relevant for the devices and the space that we are operating in at the moment. So there's definitely a shift that's going to happen, where in all likelihood the work becomes less manual and more technical. So, you're going to need to start looking at that, as opposed to people that are legacy, sort of on the job qualified, might need to do a little bit to upskill and reskill. And then, I think bottom line is we want to see an industry in 115 years that's a lot leaner, that is growing at lightning speed in terms of digital. It will be data driven, that we know from variable data and QR coding, RFID, and everything that we're seeing, that's environmentally accountable, because for the longest time we've always been seen as a sector that contributes the most to pollution and all the negative aspects of the environment, whereas we actually do the most in trying to become the cleanest sector, through how we recycle water and, the plant-based inks and various other substrates that are not now a lot more user-friendly or environmentally friendly. And I think you definitely will start to see a much sharper shift towards a more focus on value as opposed to volume, because we know the volume long runs is out the window now. So we now need to look at value, which is your shorter runs that are giving a lot more embellishment, a lot more uniqueness. And I think that's what we can project, if not for the next 5 years, possibly the way things are moving in the next 3. So 115 is a completely different sphere.
And of course, that value that you mentioned there becomes so much more accessible once the capability is made more aware. So, there's a perfect circle here, isn't there? If people only knew what the industry was capable of, it would be able to do more of what it's capable of. And that's the catch-22 where we are. So, but hopefully today's discussion, and you've been brilliant guests, so thank you for joining me today. But I think this discussion, let's look at this again in 115 years' time. Abisha, you'll still be here. You'll probably be hosting it. Hopefully Print Island will still be here. But it'll be interesting to see, how in 115 minutes time, how much this industry has moved on. But I think with you two guys, and Printing SA doing such a fantastic job that you are for your members, there's some hope there, isn't there? And we'll take that forward, that we can all grow. Abisha, thank you for fighting your way through a cold today. I really appreciate that. And Jermaine, thank you for your time as well, both of you, for joining me today on the Lighthouse here on Print Island.
Thank you, Rich. Thanks for the opportunity. Keep well.